Ambassador Krell had seen many strange things in his 40 cycles of diplomatic service. He'd watched the Centaurians eat their food while hanging upside down, which was apparently a sign of respect, but looked more like a circus act gone wrong. He'd observed the crystalline Vextar communicate through interpretive dance, which made every trade negotiation feel like a very confusing ballet. He'd even survived a Clorthian poetry recital, which was less poetry and more aggressive screaming about honor and death. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for humans. The problem started 3 rotations ago when the human delegation arrived at the Galactic Council station. According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Krell, being the unfortunate soul assigned to human relations, had reviewed their file extensively. Death world species, persistence predators, endurance that bordered on supernatural, a disturbing tendency to adopt anything with eyes as a pet. The file was 17,000 pages long and somehow still felt incomplete. What the file hadn't mentioned was that humans traveled with cubs. Not their own cubs, mind you. That would have made sense. Humans had brought cubs from 6 different species, including 2 Rexari younglings whose parents had perished in a mining accident. The humans had apparently just decided to keep them, because of course they had. It's called fostering, the human named Jennifer Martinez had explained with that peculiar facial expression humans called a smile, which showed far too many teeth to be anything other than a threat display. We couldn't just leave them orphaned. Krell had nodded slowly, his translator implant working overtime. The Rexari cubs were massive quadrupedal carnivores whose adult forms could tear through reinforced steel. Their cubs were the size of small hovercraft and possessed the temperament of a malfunctioning plasma grenade. Of course, he'd said, because what else could you say to a species that looked at apex predator cubs and thought, yes, excellent, I shall nurture these. The real trouble began during the interspecies cultural exchange gala, which was exactly as tedious as it sounded. Picture 200 different species trying to appreciate each other's music, food, and art, while secretly wondering if assassination might be less painful than another minute of Gravellian throat singing. The human delegation had brought all 6 cubs. They need socialization, Jennifer had said, as though this was obvious. As though bringing half a dozen unpredictable young predators to a formal diplomatic function was perfectly normal. Krell had assigned an entire security team to monitor the situation. 3 hours into the gala, every single one of his guards had resigned. Not requested transfer. Resigned, as in, left their posts, deleted their credentials, and caught the next transport off station. Because the cubs were, to use the technical diplomatic term, complete chaos incarnate. The Rexari cubs, named Chomper and Bitey by the humans with their characteristic gift for creative nomenclature, had discovered that the ice sculptures made excellent chew toys. The 2 Fenrisian pups, Shadow and Nightshade, had formed a pack-hunting strategy that involved stealing appetizers from every single buffet table simultaneously. The crystalline spawn, which humans had inexplicably named Sparkle, kept refracting light in patterns that gave people seizures. And the Vorthian kit, designated Button because humans apparently named things based on appearance rather than any logical system, had figured out how to open ventilation shafts and was currently somewhere in the station's infrastructure. Ambassador Threlix of the Centaurian Collective had approached Krell with all 6 of his eye stalks quivering in distress. This is unacceptable. The human cubs are destroying everything. They're not human cubs, Krell had corrected tiredly. They're cubs the humans adopted. That's somehow worse. It really was. The breaking point came when Chomper decided that the Gravellian ambassador's ceremonial robes looked delicious. To be fair to Chomper, the robes were made from organic fiber and probably did smell appetizing. To be fair to the Gravellian ambassador, having a cub the size of a transport shuttle attempt to eat your clothing while you're wearing it is generally considered a diplomatic incident. The Gravellian had begun the traditional war screech, which sounded like a garbage compactor attempting opera. Bitey had interpreted this as a play signal and joined in. The Fenrisian pups had howled in harmony. Sparkle had started pulsing lights in what was probably excitement, but looked like a rave. And Button, who had apparently found her way back through the vents, emerged directly above the dessert table and landed in what Krell-Thar would later learn humans called a cannonball position. The custard explosion was visible from 3 decks away. Krell-Thar had been composing his resignation letter in his head when Jennifer Martinez had simply walked into the center of the chaos and clapped her hands together. Twice, loudly, everything stopped, not gradually, instantly. Chomper and Bitey froze mid-rampage. Shadow and Nightshade sat down so quickly they skidded. Sparkle's lights dimmed to a soft glow. Button, covered in custard and looking very pleased with herself, went completely still. Bedtime, Jennifer had announced. And here was where things got weird. Well, weirder. The Cubs had all started making sounds. Not aggressive sounds, not even playful sounds. These were soft, distressed noises that Krell-Thar's translator rendered as approximately equivalent to no and not tired, and 5 more minutes, please. Jennifer had given them what humans called the look. Krell-Thar had seen this expression before in human diplomatic negotiations. It was the face that said, "I am not angry, I am disappointed," which somehow was infinitely worse than anger. The Cubs had immediately begun crying. Actual crying. Tears and whimpering and the kind of pitiful sounds that made Krell-Thar's cardiac organ hurt despite his better judgment. These were the same Cubs that had been terrorizing trained security personnel minutes ago. Now they looked absolutely heartbroken at the prospect of sleep. "Oh, come here," Jennifer had said, her voice transforming from firm to unbearably gentle. "You're just overtired, aren't you?" "Yes, you are. Come on." She'd sat down right there on the floor of the ruined gala hall, heedless of the custard and broken ice sculptures and torn decorations. And then, one by one, she'd gathered the Cubs. Chomper had approached first, his massive head lowered, making small chuffing sounds. Jennifer had scratched behind his ear ridge, right in that spot that made his back leg kick involuntarily. "There's my good boy," she'd murmured. "You're just sleepy, I know. Everything's too exciting, isn't it?" Bitey had climbed into her lap, which should have been physically impossible given that Bitey weighed approximately 3 times what Jennifer did. Somehow, she'd made room. Her hand had found the spot under Bitey's jaw that made her melt. The Fenrisian pups had curled up on either side of her, their heads resting on her legs. Sparkle had dimmed to almost nothing and settled near her shoulder, pulsing in a rhythm that matched Jennifer's heartbeat. Button had claimed the last available space, which was partially on Jennifer's foot and partially on Chomper's back. And then, as the entire gala hall watched in absolute silence, Jennifer had begun to hum. It wasn't any song Krell-Thar recognized. It probably wasn't any official human song at all. Just a melody, soft and rhythmic and somehow fundamentally peaceful. Her hand moved from cub to cub, offering pets and scratches and gentle touches. She rocked slightly, a motion so subtle it was almost imperceptible. "That's it," she'd whispered. "You're all right. Everyone's safe. Time to rest now." Within 5 minutes, Chomper was snoring. Within 10, all 6 Cubs were completely unconscious, their breathing synchronized with Jennifer's humming. They looked absolutely peaceful, like they'd never caused a moment of chaos in their entire lives. The silence in the hall was profound. Ambassador Threlix had approached cautiously, all 6 eye stalks focused on the scene. "How?" he'd said, which wasn't really a complete question but somehow conveyed everything. Jennifer had looked up, still humming softly, and shrugged. Just shrugged. Like this was normal. Like sitting on a destroyed gala floor covered in custard with 6 different species of predator cubs sleeping on you was just another Tuesday. "They were overtired," she'd said simply. Cubs get fussy when they're overtired. They needed someone to help them settle. They destroyed 3 million credits worth of decorations, Trellix had said weakly. They're babies, Jennifer had replied, as though this explained everything. And somehow, infuriatingly, it kind of did. Krelthar had watched his entire understanding of the universe reorganize itself. These cubs had terrified trained soldiers. They'd caused a diplomatic incident. They'd been, by any objective measure, completely out of control. And this human had simply decided they needed a nap. More importantly, she'd been right. How long will they sleep? Krelthar had asked. Few hours, probably. They had a big day. Jennifer had adjusted slightly, making sure Bitey's head wasn't at an uncomfortable angle. They'll wake up hungry, so someone should probably prepare food. Chomper likes his meat barely warm. Bitey prefers hers frozen. The Fenrisian pups need the high-protein pellets, not the grain-based ones. Sparkle absorbs mineral solutions, but make sure it's the one with added calcium because she's still growing. And Button eats literally anything, but she really loves those root vegetables, the purple ones. She'd rattled this off while simultaneously scratching multiple cubs in their preferred locations, adjusting her position to better support their weight, and keeping up that soft humming. Multitasking apparently came naturally to humans. You know all their preferences, Krelthar had observed. Of course, they're my kids. Jennifer had said this with such casual sincerity that Krelthar had to recalibrate his translator. These were not her biological offspring. They were not even her species. They were, by any rational measure, dangerous predators. And she just called them her kids. Your file said humans adopt things, Krelthar had said faintly. Well, yeah, these guys needed someone. Jennifer had looked down at the sleeping cubs with an expression that Krelthar's translator struggled with before settling on love. Who else was going to take care of them? Their own species? Trellix had suggested, his eye stalks waving in confusion. The Rexari said cubs without pack bonds are better off dead. The Fenrisian colonies were overcrowded and wanted to cull the weak pups. The Crystalline Collective considers orphan spawn to be resource waste. The Vorthians wanted to use Button for manual labor. Jennifer's voice had gone very flat. So yeah, I took them. We took them. The whole human delegation is helping raise them. Krelthar had pulled up the adoption laws on his datapad. They were extensive. They were also, he realized with growing horror, mostly written because of humans. Humans who kept adopting things. Everything. Anything orphaned, injured, or abandoned was apparently fair game for human acquisition. There was an entire subsection about humans adopting species classified as dangerous. There was a longer subsection about humans adopting species classified as actively hostile. There was a footnote about a human who'd apparently adopted a void wraith, which was less a creature and more a physics anomaly that ate matter. The human had named it Mr. Whiskers. It was now considered a protected entity under human guardianship laws. Your species is insane, Krelthar had said. Yeah, probably. Jennifer had agreed cheerfully. But these cubs are getting a childhood. They're getting bedtime stories and favorite foods, and someone who'll sit with them when they have nightmares. They're getting to be kids. Bitey had made a small sound in her sleep, something between a purr and a growl. Jennifer had immediately adjusted her hand position, finding a new spot to scratch. Bitey had settled back into deep sleep. They trust you, Trellix had observed. I hope so. Trust takes time to build, especially for cubs who've been through trauma. Jennifer had looked at each sleeping face in turn. But we're getting there. They're starting to understand that they're safe. That someone's going to be there when they're scared or hungry or just need a hug. The Rexari don't hug, Krelthar had pointed out. They do now, Jennifer had said with absolute confidence. Chomper loves hugs. He pretends he doesn't, but he totally does. As if in agreement, Chomper had shifted slightly, pressing closer to Jennifer in his sleep. The gala had eventually resumed, though significantly more subdued. The delegates had given Jennifer and her sleeping cubs a wide berth, which was partly respect and partly fear. Watching a human casually pet apex predators while covered in custard had that effect. Krelthar had spent the rest of the evening researching human child-rearing practices. What he'd found had been terrifying. Humans didn't just feed their young. They sang to them, told them stories, played games designed to teach and bond. They spent years, sometimes decades, nurturing their offspring through vulnerability to capability. And apparently, they'd decided to extend this behavior to any cubs they encountered. "It's the pack-bonding instinct," his assistant had explained. A young Trellin named Vix who'd spent time on Earth. Humans form emotional attachments very easily. They can't help it. Something about their evolution as cooperative social hunters. They see something young and vulnerable, and their brain just goes, "Yes, this is mine now. I will protect it with my life." That's a terrible survival strategy, Krelthar had said. It served them pretty well, actually. Their adoption practices have created complex alliance networks across hundreds of species. Those cubs Jennifer's raising, their biological species now have formal protection agreements with humanity. Because humans take care of their own, and they've decided these cubs are their own. Krelthar had stared at his assistant. "You're saying humans accidentally created diplomatic relationships by adopting random cubs?" "I'm saying humans don't see them as random cubs. They see them as children who need families." Vix had pulled up a chart showing human adoption statistics. The numbers were staggering. There are currently over 3 million non-human individuals under human guardianship across the galaxy. Most are cubs or juveniles. All are treated as full family members with legal rights and protections. That's completely irrational, evolutionarily bizarre, strategically brilliant. Vix had smiled, which looked wrong on Trellins, but they'd learned it from humans. "Yeah, that's humans." 3 hours later, the cubs had begun to wake. Jennifer had somehow known before they'd even opened their eyes, her humming shifting to a brighter melody. One by one, they'd stirred, yawning and stretching and looking around with sleepy confusion. "Good nap?" Jennifer had asked, and received various chirps, chuffs, and crystalline chimes in response. "I bet you're hungry. Let's get you all fed." The feeding process had been a logistical operation that required precise timing and spatial awareness. Jennifer had orchestrated it while simultaneously preventing fights, ensuring everyone got their preferred food, and maintaining what she called positive reinforcement. "Good waiting, Chomper." "Yes, that's excellent patience, Bitey." "Shadow, no stealing from your sister." "Nightshade, I saw that. Put it back." "Sparkle, sweetie, you need to absorb slowly or you'll get a tummy ache." "Button, how did you get 3 portions? You little sneak." Krelthar had watched this performance with something approaching awe. Jennifer had moved through the chaos with practiced ease, her attention divided between 6 different cubs with 6 different needs, and somehow making it look effortless. "Do you need assistance?" he'd asked. "Nah, we've got our routine down." Jennifer had booped Button on the nose, which made the kit squeak indignantly. Though if you could make sure the other delegates know the cubs are sorry about the gala, they really didn't mean to cause trouble. They just got overstimulated. "I'll convey your message. Thanks. Oh, and if anyone's robes got damaged, send me the repair bills. I've got a fund set up for cub-related incidents. It's surprisingly well used." Of course she had a fund for that. Of course she did. The days that followed had been a revelation. Krelthar had found himself observing Jennifer and the cubs with increasing fascination. He'd watched her teach Chomper and Bitey how to hunt using simulation programs. He'd seen her help Shadow and Nightshade develop their pack coordination. He'd observed her showing Sparkle how to modulate her light output for communication. He'd witnessed her teaching Button advanced problem-solving skills that most adults of Button's species never mastered. But more than that, he'd seen the gentleness, the patience, the unconditional care. When Chomper had nightmares, Jennifer had sat with him until dawn, her hand on his head, humming softly. When Bitey had gotten sick from eating something she shouldn't have, Jennifer had stayed in the medical bay for 2 days straight, refusing to leave her side. When the Fenrisian pups had gotten into a fight, Jennifer had separated them, talked them through their feelings, and helped them apologize to each other. When Sparkle had accidentally hurt another cub with her lights, Jennifer had held her while she cried and taught her how to be more careful. When Button had gotten stuck in a vent again, Jennifer had crawled in after her, retrieved her, and then very gently explained why vent crawling during diplomatic meetings was maybe not the best idea. Every single time, Jennifer had been there. Steady, reliable, safe. The cubs had flourished. Krelthar had seen it in the way they moved, the confidence in their steps, the way they played, rough and tumble but never truly aggressive. The way they sought Jennifer out not just for food or safety, but for comfort, for approval, for affection. The way they'd started calling her Mama, not in their own languages, in English, the human word. They'd learned it from her, and they'd claimed it as their own. "Mama, watch this!" Chomper would call, before attempting some feat of strength or agility. "Mama, I'm hungry," Bitey would announce, usually about 30 seconds before her scheduled feeding time. "Mama, Shadow took my toy," Nightshade would complain, leading to Jennifer's intervention and a lesson about sharing. "Mama, look how bright I can get." Sparkle would pulse, showing off her growing control. "Mama, I found a new vent," Button would report with obvious pride, then deflate when Jennifer gave her the look. And every single time, Jennifer would respond, would praise or comfort or correct or simply be present. She was their constant in a universe that had proven itself dangerous and unpredictable. She was their mother. The Galactic Council meeting where this became official policy was one for the history files. Ambassador Threlix had proposed formally recognizing human guardianship over non-human cubs, with full legal protections and parental rights. The debate had been intense. "This sets a dangerous precedent," the Rexari delegate had argued. "These are our species' young." "With respect," Jennifer had replied, standing before the council with all 6 cubs arranged around her. "These are cubs your species abandoned. They're my kids now. You can't just claim, 'Watch me.'" Jennifer had crossed her arms. "I've fed them, clothed them, taught them, comforted them, kept them safe. I've been there for every nightmare, every achievement, every moment of their lives for the past rotation. I'm not their biological mother, but I am their mama. And if you think you're taking them from me, you're going to discover exactly why humans are classified as persistence predators." The threat had been delivered in the sweetest, most pleasant tone imaginable. Somehow that made it infinitely more terrifying. The vote had passed unanimously. Krelthar had approached Jennifer after the session. "You did well in there." "Thanks. I was ready to fight them all if I had to." She'd said this while gently braiding Nightshade's fur. "Nobody's taking my babies. Your babies are terrifying apex predators. They're perfect angels who just need proper nap time schedules and consistent boundaries." Jennifer had finished the braid and moved on to Shadow. "Plus, lots of love. Cubs need so much love. Humans are bizarre." "Yeah, but we're really good at the whole family thing." Jennifer had smiled. That too-many-teeth expression that Krelthar had learned meant genuine happiness. These guys are going to grow up knowing they're wanted. They're going to have full, happy lives. That's what matters. Chomper had chosen that moment to flop onto Jennifer's feet, pinning her in place. Bitey had joined him. Then the Fenrisian pups, then Sparkle and Button. "Nap time?" Jennifer had asked. A chorus of tired chirps and chuffs had confirmed this. "Thought so. You guys played hard today." Jennifer had somehow maneuvered herself to the floor without disturbing any cubs, gathering them all in an impressive display of spatial reasoning. "Come on then, Mama's got you." And just like always, she'd begun to hum. Just like always, the cubs had settled immediately. Just like always, within minutes they were all sleeping peacefully. Krelthar had watched this scene, this human covered in cubs from half a dozen species, all trusting her completely, all safe in her presence. He'd thought about his resignation letter, still saved in his datapad. He'd deleted it. Working with humans was going to be interesting, chaotic, occasionally terrifying. But watching Jennifer with her cubs, seeing the pure love and dedication, witnessing these once traumatized young creatures blossom into confident, happy children. Yeah, he could handle interesting. Besides, someone needed to document this. Future generations needed to understand how humanity had accidentally conquered the galaxy through aggressive adoption and militant caregiving. Jennifer's soft humming filled the diplomatic suite, and 6 cubs slept peacefully in her arms. Ambassador Krelthar began typing his report, and couldn't help but smile while doing it. "Humans," he wrote. "They'll pack bond with anything, and somehow, that makes the galaxy a better place." He paused, then added, "Also, never schedule important diplomatic events during nap time. Trust me on this." The file was marked for immediate distribution to all council members. In her arms, Chomper snored softly, dreaming peaceful dreams. Button's tail twitched in sleep. Sparkle pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. And Jennifer hummed, steady and sure, the sound of safety itself. Somewhere in the station, another human was probably adopting something they shouldn't, but that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, the cubs were peaceful, and that was all that mattered.